The air at the training camp was sharp that morning, carrying the sting of dust and gunpowder. A line of young recruits stood with rifles pressed awkwardly against their shoulders, each one trying desperately to appear calm, though the tremor in their hands betrayed them. They were the newest batch of snipers in training, handpicked after grueling weeks of basic drills, and yet nothing about them looked precise or lethal. Their boots were dusty, their uniforms slightly oversized, and their eyes, though determined, shone more with fear than with focus. The targets in the distance seemed to mock them. Wooden boards painted with black circles, lined neatly across the range, swayed gently in the wind. They were not far, not even at true sniper distance, yet the young men might as well have been shooting at shadows. "Ready your rifles," barked an instructor, his voice hoarse from years of shouting. He was a stern man with a scar cutting across his cheek, proof of his own service in battles these boys couldn't yet imagine. Steady, breathe, and fire. The sharp cracks of rifles filled the air in uneven rhythm. Smoke curled upward, and the recoil sent shoulders jerking back. For a moment, the recruits squinted hopefully through their scopes, praying to see a hole in the target. But one by one, disappointment fell on their faces. Not a single target had been struck. The instructor's eyes narrowed. He didn't need binoculars to see the failure. Again, he snapped. The recruits adjusted awkwardly, shifting feet, reloading magazines with trembling hands. Some tried to mimic what they had seen in training manuals, tightening their grip or slowing their breath. Others simply pulled the trigger harder, as if aggression alone could guide the bullet. Fire! Another round of shots cracked through the morning. Dirt puffed up harmlessly in patches far from the targets. A bullet struck the wooden frame holding one board, splintering it, but still missing the mark entirely. The instructor muttered something under his breath, then shouted, "Not one hit." Pathetic. His words carried across the field, burning into the recruits' ears. Among the line, a boy named Carter swallowed hard. He had joined the program straight out of his small hometown, where stories of snipers were spoken with all men who could end a battle with a single shot. He had dreamed of becoming one of them, imagined writing home about his precision, about the respect he would earn. But now, sweat trickled down his temples as shame gripped him. He couldn't even steady his breath, let alone hit the target. Beside him, another recruit, Alvarez, bit his lip in frustration. His father had been a marksman in the military decades before, a man whose stories of discipline and deadliness filled their household. Alvarez had thought it would come naturally to him, a matter of bloodline. Yet his shots landed nowhere near the circle, and every failure felt like an insult to his father's memory. The range officer lifted a pair of binoculars, scanning the ruined dirt around the targets. "You think an enemy's going to stand still and wait for you to find your aim?" He roared. "Out there, you don't get a second chance. You miss, you die. Or worse, you miss, your brothers die." The weight of his words pressed down heavier than the rifles in their hands. The young men shuffled nervously, each one realizing that their failures weren't just embarrassing, they were dangerous. They tried again, and again, and again. Hours passed under the beating sun, sweat staining their uniforms, shoulders aching from recoil. Each shot chipped away at their morale, every miss tightening the knot of shame in their chests. By midday, the targets remained nearly untouched. The recruits slumped, exhaustion stealing the energy from their bodies. Some stared at the ground, unable to meet their instructor's eyes. Others glanced sideways at their fellow trainees, hoping to find reassurance in someone else's confidence. But there was none. They were all failing together, drowning in the same humiliation. From the sidelines, other soldiers watched. These were not recruits, but regular infantry who had gathered out of curiosity. They leaned against barriers, smirking, whispering jokes. These are the snipers? Might as well throw rocks. Their laughter carried across the field, slicing deeper into the boys than any reprimand. Carter clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms. The shame burned. He had never wanted anything more in his life, but the harder he tried, the worse he seemed to perform. His breathing grew shallow, hurried, and his shots flew wild. Patience. The instructor barked. Patience and control. But his words fell flat. The boys were too lost in their fear and self-doubt. The drill ended in silence. The instructor, clearly disgusted, dismissed them with a wave of his hand. Get out of my sight. Tomorrow, we start again. And God help you if you embarrass this camp again. The recruits lowered their rifles, each one feeling the weight of failure pressing harder than the weapon itself. As they filed off the range, heads bowed, Carter glanced once more at the untouched targets. The black circles stood pristine, almost mocking, as if to say, "You don't belong here." In the barracks that evening, the air was heavy. Conversations were sparse, broken only by the occasional mutter of frustration or sigh of defeat. Alvarez sat on his bunk, disassembling and reassembling his rifle in a nervous rhythm, trying to convince himself that the problem was mechanical, not within him. Carter lay staring at the ceiling, replaying every missed shot in his mind, each echo of failure louder than the last. "We're hopeless," one recruit muttered finally, his voice carrying a mix of bitterness and despair. "We're supposed to be snipers, but we can't even hit wood." No one disagreed. Outside the barracks, the night wind carried the faint sound of rifles from other units training. Their shots rang sharp and clean, striking targets with satisfying precision. Every sound was a reminder of what these boys weren't, what they might never be. And yet, among them, none realized they were being watched. From the shadows near the training grounds, a figure observed silently. Her arms were crossed, her stance relaxed, but her eyes sharp. She had seen recruits stumble before, but this was different. They weren't lacking in will. They were drowning in doubt. The woman said nothing, not yet. She simply watched as the boys carried their shame into the night, each one unaware that the turning point of their story was approaching. For now, they were failures, young snipers, who missed again and again. But soon, someone would show them what true precision looked like, and it would come from the last person they expected. The sun had climbed higher, and the air at the training camp grew hotter and heavier. Dust swirled around the recruits as they lined up once again on the firing range, rifles in hand, eyes wide with a mixture of determination and dread. The echoes of their previous failures still lingered like ghosts, weighing down their shoulders, twisting their confidence into something brittle and fragile. Each boy carried the humiliation of yesterday's drill, and with every step toward the range, that burden grew heavier. Commanders circled the line like hawks, their eyes sharp, scanning every twitch, every uneven grip. Among them, Sergeant Marshall, a veteran of countless operations, shook his head. He had seen hundreds of young recruits, some who flourished and some who collapsed under pressure. These boys, however, were testing his patience in ways he had never thought possible. "You call that steady?" Marshall barked, pointing at a recruit whose hands were quivering as he adjusted his stance. "You think the enemy will wait for you to find your courage? They'll see you shaking like leaves and end you before you blink." The recruit, a wiry 17-year-old named Benton, swallowed hard, his throat dry. He had trained endlessly, memorized every manual, drilled every technique, and yet the results seemed always just out of reach. His eyes darted to the target, a black circle perched on a wooden board 30 meters away, but the image wavered in his mind. "Steady, steady," he whispered to himself, but his fingers betrayed him. Nearby, Alvarez wiped sweat from his brow, scowling. Pride had always been a driving force in his life, but today it burned him like fire. He thought of his father, a man revered in their hometown for his sharpshooting, and he felt the sting of inadequacy deepen. "If only you could see me now, Dad," he thought bitterly. "I can't even hit wood." The recruits raised their rifles. The commands came sharp, slicing through the thick air. "Prepare to fire. Ready, aim. Fire." The first round cracked into the ground, sending a plume of dust skyward. The second, third, fourth each followed in rapid succession. The targets remained untouched. Not a single black circle bore the mark of a bullet. Marshall's jaw tightened. "Again, all of you. Until you can hit that target, you're wasting my time." For the boys, it felt as if time itself had slowed. Every fiber of their bodies screamed with tension, and every heartbeat thundered in their ears. This wasn't just another drill. It was a test of their very worth. Each miss wasn't merely a failure. It was proof, at least in their minds, that they were unworthy of the title they had been promised, sniper. The weight of expectations pressed down on them in multiple ways. First, there were the instructors, with their sharp eyes, unyielding standards, and deep skepticism. Then came the veterans and observers, men and women who had seen war up close, who carried stories of precision, danger, and death. Every shot missed was a disappointment to them. Every misfire a confirmation that these boys had no business handling a rifle at all. Finally, there were the recruits themselves. Their own expectations, built on dreams, pride, and hope, clashed violently with reality. They had envisioned themselves striking targets with perfect accuracy, embodying the legends they had grown up hearing about. Instead, they faced only repeated failure, each one compounding the last. Carter adjusted his grip again, trying to steady himself. He could feel the eyes of his peers on him, measuring, judging. Each glance was like a weight added to his spine. One wrong move, one tremor, and he imagined the ridicule that would follow. The humiliation of failure had a way of sticking, of echoing longer than success ever could. Beside him, another recruit, Lang, muttered under his breath, frustration spilling over. "I've trained for months." "And for what?" "Dirt, dust, nothing." His words were sharp, carrying both anger and desperation. He wanted to throw the rifle, run off the range, anything to escape the relentless pressure that seemed to tighten with each heartbeat. The instructors ignored his muttering, focused instead on the others. "Your problems aren't bullets, they're in your heads," Sergeant Marshall shouted. "If your mind isn't steady, your hand never will be." But the recruits felt trapped. The more they tried to concentrate, the more elusive precision became. Each shot felt forced, mechanical, lacking the subtle rhythm that true marksmanship demanded. It was as if their own anxiety had taken physical form, shaking their hands, clouding their vision, sabotaging every attempt. Other units training nearby had already moved on to advanced drills. Their rifles cracked with confidence and accuracy, sending bullets striking true, targets rattling under their impact. The young recruits couldn't help but glance sideways, envy and self-doubt gnawing at them. "They make it look so easy," Carter thought bitterly. "Why can't we?" Marshall's voice cut through the muttering of the boys. "Stop looking at them. This is your trial. Focus on what you can control." But control seemed impossible. Every nerve, every muscle, every thought felt like it was conspiring against them. One by one, they fired and missed. Dirt, dust, and shattered wood were all they could claim as results. The instructors sighed, frustrated but not surprised. These were not mere mistakes. They were systemic failures, the product of fear, inexperience, and overconfidence in youth. "Do you even want this?" one officer asked bluntly, eyeing the line. "Or are you here for some fantasy of glory?" The recruits lowered their rifles, too exhausted to respond. None of them dared admit they were trembling. That inside, their confidence had crumbled entirely. They had come with dreams of honor, skill, and pride, and found only humiliation and doubt. Yet despite all this, a quiet ember of determination remained. Carter and Alvarez, along with a few others, did not give up entirely. Deep down, beneath the shame and the fear, was a stubborn refusal to surrender. They wanted to succeed not just for the instructors, or their families, or the camp, but for themselves. They wanted to be capable, to prove that they belonged. Even in failure, there was a spark. And that spark, unnoticed by the instructors, but visible to a certain observer lurking in the shadows, was exactly what the veteran had been waiting for. She watched silently, analyzing every tremor, every misfire, every frustrated glance. These boys were flawed, yes, but not broken. They needed guidance, not punishment. She understood that it was patience, not scolding, that would turn this failure into skill. As the day wore on, the drills continued. Recruits fired again and again, hitting nothing but dirt, dust, and the occasional splintered edge of a target. Their confidence ebbed, drained by heat, repetition, and the unrelenting pressure of expectation. Some collapsed onto the benches, exhausted. Others stared blankly into the distance, replaying mistakes over and over in their minds. By evening, the recruits sat together quietly, sharing a collective weight of shame. Even the normally confident Alvarez avoided conversation, chewing on the inside of his cheek. Carter rested his chin on his hands, thinking of all the things he had imagined himself accomplishing, now slipping further away. Outside, the veteran still watched, unseen. She didn't intervene, didn't correct, didn't scold. She only observed, patient and calculating. Somewhere in her mind, a plan was forming, a way to teach these boys what the instructors could not, that marksmanship was more than muscle, more than repetition. It was about the mind, the heart, the connection between shooter and rifle, focus and patience. For now, the boys were drowning under the weight of expectations, those of instructors, peers, families, and themselves. But change, she knew, was coming. It would not be immediate. It would not be easy, but it would arrive in a way no one could ignore. And when it did, it would alter the course of their training and their lives forever. A sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the firing range. Dust danced in the air as the young recruits attempted yet another round of drills, their rifles trembling in their hands. Sweat clung to their brows, their breaths came in shallow, uneven gasps, and every missed shot carved deeper into their pride. They had been failing for days, weeks even, and now their morale teetered on the brink of collapse. Somewhere near the perimeter of the range, hidden slightly behind a cluster of trees, a figure observed in silence. She was easy to miss at first. Glance a woman, mid-30s, dressed in nondescript civilian clothing. But there was a certain aura about her, a stillness that drew the eye, even when she remained perfectly still. Her posture was relaxed, yet every movement seemed deliberate, purposeful, and in command of the space around her. She didn't need to shout or gesture. Her presence alone carried authority. Her eyes were sharp, scanning every movement of the young recruits. Each twitch of a finger, every nervous adjustment of a scope, every flinch from the recoil, it all told her something about them. They were not lazy, nor entirely incapable. They simply lacked focus, understanding, and most of all, patience. She had seen this before, countless times, but rarely with such a combination of raw desire and debilitating self-doubt. For the recruits, oblivious to her presence, the day dragged on. Sergeant Marshall paced along the line like a predator circling prey, his face set in a permanent scowl. Focus. He barked, voice cutting through the air. Your mind controls the rifle. You do not control the rifle if your mind wavers. The recruits tried. They tightened their grips, squared their shoulders, and aimed at the black circles in the distance. But their attempts were mechanical, hollow, lacking the rhythm and harmony that true marksmanship required. A round would splinter the wooden frame of a target. Another would kick up dirt inches away. The boys' frustration grew with each miss, and some began to slump under the mental weight of their failure. Watching silently, the woman's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't intervene, not yet. Intervention would be premature. First, she needed to understand them, to read their weaknesses as if they were laid bare on the firing range. She studied Carter, the boy whose determination was undercut by nerves. His hands shook with each breath, his eyes darted constantly, and his posture was stiff and unnatural. She noted his patterns, his habits, his small errors that no instructor had yet corrected. Next, Alvarez. His pride weighed him down more than the rifle itself. He aimed with precision in his mind, but hesitation always struck first. He wanted to succeed, yet feared failing, and the tension manifested in the tiniest tremor at the end of his finger. This veteran knew the dangerous combination, raw talent and paralyzing fear. If handled correctly, it could be transformed into remarkable skill. Mismanaged, it would be wasted entirely. Even the quieter recruits drew her attention. Lang, muttering complaints under his breath, carried frustration like a shield. His body tensed when he fired, his breathing uneven. Yet, behind the irritability was potential. If he could harness his anger instead of letting it sabotage him, he could become formidable. She shifted slightly, leaning on one leg as she continued her silent survey. A sniper's eyes, she thought, were more than a tool. They were a measure of patience, a reflection of focus and composure. These boys had the physical tools, yet none had found the mental discipline necessary to synchronize with the weapon. Each rifle, she knew, was an extension of the shooter's mind, and their minds were fractured. From a distance, Sergeant Marshall did notice her, finally. "What's she doing here?" He muttered under his breath, irritated. She wasn't supposed to be at this drill. She was retired after all, her days of active service behind her. Yet he couldn't deny the precision with which she watched, the almost predatory patience in her stance. There was something about her that unsettled him, a sense that she saw more than anyone else, that she understood the failures of the young recruits in a way he could not articulate. The veteran remained silent, though she took mental notes. She observed Carter's posture, Alvarez's hesitation, Lang's tension. She catalogued each error, each nervous tick, each subtle misalignment of the rifle or shift of weight. And then she began to notice patterns. Every misfire had its cause. An uncontrolled breath, a flicker of fear, a microsecond of impatience. If she intervened, she could correct it, but first, she needed them to fail fully, to understand the frustration that came from trying without comprehension. The day wore on, heat building with the relentless sun. The recruits were exhausted, muscles aching, minds weary from overthinking. Mistakes multiplied. One recruit, shaking under the weight of expectation, fired 3 rounds that bounced uselessly into the dirt. He lowered the rifle, shoulders slumping, jaw tight with suppressed anger and embarrassment. "I can't. I just can't," he muttered to himself, voice barely audible over the distant cracking of successful shots from neighboring units. The veteran's eyes softened slightly, though her expression remained unreadable. She had been there herself once. She remembered the days when her first rounds had missed, when the weight of expectation threatened to crush her spirit. But she had learned to master it, to synchronize mind, breath, and weapon into one fluid motion. And she knew that these boys, flawed and trembling though they were, had the spark of potential buried deep within. She shifted again, her fingers brushing a small notebook she carried at her side. Not for training notes, not for rank or commendations, but for observation. Every recruit's failure, every hesitation, every micro-adjustment, she wrote down mentally. This wasn't just about firing a rifle. It was about understanding human nature, understanding fear and pride and ambition, and using that understanding to guide them. Carter fired again, a little slower this time, breathing controlled but still nervous. The bullet struck slightly closer to the target, but still missed. His shoulders sagged in disappointment. Alvarez cursed under his breath, shaking his head. "It's hopeless," he muttered, voice low but fierce. Lang's frustration boiled over, and he slammed the butt of the rifle on the ground, startling nearby recruits. The veteran's gaze sharpened. Patience, she reminded herself. Timing. They needed guidance, not scolding. They needed to see that the rifle was not the enemy, that it was an extension of their mind and body. But first, she needed them to recognize the weight of failure, to feel it, to wrestle with it, and to understand that the true battle was not with the target, but with themselves. As the afternoon dragged on, the instructor barked orders, pacing along the line. "Again, I don't care how long it takes, but you will hit the target. You will prove yourselves." The veteran's eyes lingered on him for a moment, a flicker of amusement in her gaze. Authority could command, but understanding commanded more. The young men needed both, but the instructors only offered authority. She alone could provide insight. Finally, as shadows lengthened and the heat began to wane, the recruits lowered their rifles. Exhaustion weighed on them like lead. Carter's hands shook as he set the rifle down. Alvarez wiped sweat from his brow, muttering curses. Lang slumped against the barrier, breathing heavily. And still, the targets remained untouched. The veteran straightened, stepping back into the shadow of the trees. She had seen enough for now. She had catalogued errors, studied habits, and assessed potential. Tomorrow, perhaps, she would intervene not to scold, not to humiliate, but to teach. To show these boys what a rifle could do in the hands of one who understood its rhythm, its subtle demands, its need for connection with the shooter's mind. For now, she remained silent, watching the sun dip lower toward the horizon, casting a warm glow across the exhausted recruits. They did not know it yet, but their journey was about to change. The spark of possibility had been noticed, and the quiet observer, a veteran of countless battles, had chosen to step in. One day soon, she would pick up a rifle and show them what precision looked like, what patience felt like, and what it truly meant to wield power responsibly. Until then, she waited, silent and calculating, knowing that the seeds of change were already planted in their frustrated, trembling hands. The morning sun rose slowly over the camp, casting a pale, determined light across the firing range. Dust hung in the air like a fine haze, shimmering under the heat. The recruits filed onto the range in formation, faces tight with tension and fatigue. Their uniforms clung to them in damp, uneven patches of sweat, evidence of yesterday's failures and the long, restless night that followed. None of them had slept well. Anxiety had kept their minds racing, reliving every missed shot, every frustrated glare from their instructors. Carter's hands shook as he adjusted the scope on his rifle. He tried to focus, inhaling and exhaling in slow, measured rhythms, but his nerves betrayed him. Every fiber of his body screamed with tension. His eyes darted nervously toward the targets, the black circles looming at the far end of the range like silent judges. He could feel the weight of expectation pressing on him, his own, the instructors, his peers, and even the imagined gaze of family and hometown neighbors. Alvarez, beside him, scowled, jaw tight. Pride and frustration collided within him like twin storms. He had always wanted to prove himself, to live up to his father's reputation as a skilled marksman. But now, Week after week, the rifle seemed to mock him. Each shot that veered off target chipped away at his confidence. His knuckles turned white from gripping the rifle, yet the results remained the same: dirt, dust, splintered wood. The instructors moved along the line, their faces drawn and stern. Sergeant Marshall's eyes burned into each recruit as he circled them, watching every twitch, every flinch. Patience. Control. Focus. He barked, his voice cutting through the tension. Your mind dictates the bullet's path. If you fail to master yourself, you will never master the rifle. The recruits lifted their rifles again, aiming, holding their breath, and firing. The shots echoed across the range, each one a violent punctuation mark of hope and failure. Dirt puffed up harmlessly around the targets. Splintered edges rattled, but not a single black circle bore the mark of a bullet. Frustration built into anger. Lang slammed his rifle against the wooden barrier, a sharp crack cutting through the tense air. "This is impossible," he shouted, voice trembling with fury. "We've trained every day, and we still can't even hit the damn targets." The instructors ignored him, circling, observing, and taking note of every weakness. They had little patience for excuses, little room for error. Every misfire was not just a failure. It was a reflection of potential lost, a threat to the standards they demanded. Carter tried again, adjusting his stance, trying to mimic the methods demonstrated in the training manuals. He slowed his breathing, steadied the rifle, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet arced through the air, missing by a wide margin. His heart sank, shame flooding every fiber of his being. He lowered the rifle, shoulders heavy, wishing he could vanish. Alvarez muttered curses under his breath, shaking his head. His pride burned hotter than the sun overhead, but it did nothing to steady his aim. Every shot that missed was a reminder of his inadequacy, a shadow on the image of himself he had tried to build. He felt trapped in a cycle of failure, unable to break free. From the edge of the range, the veteran observed silently. Her posture was calm, hands clasped behind her back, eyes unblinking. She did not interfere yet. These failures were necessary. The boys had to confront their limits, feel the weight of disappointment, and wrestle with it. Only then would they be ready to learn what mastery truly required. She studied Carter's trembling hands, Alvarez's stubborn tension, Lang's frustration, all telling her exactly where intervention would be most effective. Time dragged on. The recruits fired again and again, each round echoing through the range like a drumbeat of failure. Their bodies ached, their minds reeled, and morale teetered on the brink of collapse. Sweat stung their eyes, dust filled their lungs, and yet no one could admit defeat. To do so would mean acknowledging not just the physical shortcomings, but the emotional ones: fear, doubt, and the weight of expectation crushing their spirits. Even the small victories, the occasional bullet that landed closer than expected, did little to uplift them. For every minor success, 2 more failures followed, reinforcing the narrative that they were inadequate, unfit, perhaps even failures destined to leave the program in disgrace. Lang's frustration reached a boiling point. He stomped his boot against the range barrier and shouted, "Why can't we do this? We've practiced every day. We've followed the drills exactly." His voice cracked under the strain, echoing across the field. But no answer came, only the harsh silence of failure and the distant sound of other units performing flawlessly. The veteran's eyes narrowed slightly. She could have intervened, shown them the right technique, corrected their posture, but doing so now would rob them of an essential lesson. They needed to experience the sting of repeated failure. They needed to understand that skill was not built on luck or fleeting confidence. It was forged through patience, discipline, and mental clarity. Carter's mind raced. He had imagined himself hitting targets effortlessly, earning respect, achieving something his hometown would brag about. Now, each missed shot felt like a betrayal, not of the rifle, but of himself. He tightened his grip, inhaled deeply, and tried once more. The bullet veered again, missing the black circle entirely. His chest tightened, and he felt a rising wave of despair. Alvarez's jaw clenched. Pride, frustration, and fear collided violently within him. He wanted to scream, to throw the rifle across the range, to give up entirely. But something deeper kept him rooted, gripping the weapon as if it were the last anchor to his identity. Lang, muttering under his breath, tried to calm himself, but his anger was a living thing, pulsing through every shot he took. He was close to breaking, yet within that fury was untapped potential. The veteran had noticed this. She had seen it in others before. Anger could either destroy focus or fuel extraordinary precision. The difference lay in guidance, timing, and understanding. Hours passed in a blur of missed shots, splintered targets, and frustrated sighs. The young recruits began to slump, exhaustion overtaking determination. Muscles ached, lungs burned, and their spirits hung by a thread. Each failure chipped away at their confidence, yet none could give up entirely. Pride, stubbornness, and hope, however faint, kept them standing. Finally, Sergeant Marshall blew his whistle, signaling the end of the day's drills. The recruits lowered their rifles, shoulders slumped, faces flushed with heat and humiliation. Not a single target had been hit cleanly. Dust and dirt littered the range, the remnants of thousands of wasted rounds, a testament to the relentless struggle they faced. Marshall shook his head. Pack up. And remember, failure is only the beginning if you don't learn from it. His words, though sharp, carried little comfort. The recruits trudged back to the barracks, their movements heavy with exhaustion and despair. The veteran remained at the edge of the range, watching silently as they left. She had observed everything, their techniques, their habits, their fears, their frustrations. She had catalogued their failures, but also their potential. For every trembling hand, for every flare of anger or doubt, she saw a spark of capability waiting to be nurtured. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the camp, she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The boys had failed spectacularly, but that was exactly what they needed. They would learn nothing from success alone. True mastery was born from repeated failure, from confronting frustration, from understanding the weight of expectation and learning to rise above it. Tomorrow, she would step forward. Tomorrow, she would show them what precision really looked like, what discipline truly demanded, and what it meant to harness the power of the rifle, not through force, but through understanding. But for now, the field lay silent, littered with splintered targets and the echoes of missed opportunities, a silent testament to the journey that lay ahead. And in the quiet shadows, the veteran waited, patient, calculating, knowing that soon, very soon, the course of these young lives and their path to becoming true snipers would change forever. The morning air was crisp, almost deceptively calm. The recruits lined up on the range once again, each with a rifle in hand and a heart weighed down by exhaustion, shame, and mounting pressure. Weeks of missed targets, failed drills, and relentless criticism had left them physically drained and emotionally raw. Their shoulders slumped, eyes darted nervously, and each breath seemed heavier than the last. They had become prisoners of expectation, both their own and that of the instructors who observed their every twitch. Carter adjusted his grip on his rifle, palms damp, and tried to steady his shaking hands. He inhaled slowly, counting in his mind, reminding himself of the techniques drilled into him: steady stance, controlled breath, measured trigger squeeze. But his mind was a whirlwind of fear and doubt, replaying every misfire from the past weeks. Each round fired previously had missed, splintered wood, and pockmarked dirt. The memory of yesterday's failure still clung to him, and he feared repeating it. Alvarez, standing beside him, glared at the distant targets. Pride warred with frustration, burning hotter with each passing moment. He wanted to succeed, to prove that he was worthy of the title his father had carried proudly before him. But the rifle in his hands seemed to mock him, refusing to obey the tension and anxiety that coursed through his body. Lang's frustration simmered like a coiled spring, his breath short and erratic. He had spent hours pacing the barracks the night before, replaying drills in his mind, trying to memorize what had gone wrong, searching for some solution. None had emerged. He could feel the heat rising to his face as he gripped the rifle tighter, knuckles white, wishing desperately that some miracle would guide the bullet to the target. From the edge of the range, the veteran watched silently, her posture relaxed, but her eyes sharp and unyielding. Today was different. The boys had endured repeated failure, experienced the crushing weight of expectation, and reached the limits of frustration. They were ready for guidance, ready for demonstration, ready for the spark that would ignite their understanding. The instructors, as always, were oblivious to her presence, absorbed in scolding and correcting the boys. "Focus," Sergeant Marshall barked, voice tight with frustration. "Steady your hands. Control your breathing. If you cannot hit that target, you are wasting your lives and mine." The recruits raised their rifles again, attempting to steady their minds, bodies, and weapon. Carter tried to quiet the whirlwind inside his head, forcing focus. Alvarez gritted his teeth, gripping the rifle as if sheer willpower could guide the bullet. Lang's muscles tensed, his frustration threatening to boil over. And yet, no matter how hard they tried, the bullets missed their marks. A sharp whistle cut through the tension, silencing the range. All eyes turned toward the source. For the first time, the veteran stepped forward from the shadows. Every motion was calm, deliberate, and unassuming. Yet the energy she carried calm, precise, authoritative demanded attention. The recruits froze. Whispers rippled along the line. "Who is that? I thought she was retired. She? She's going to show us how it's done?" She walked steadily toward the center of the range, her boots crunching softly on the dirt. Sergeant Marshall stiffened. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, irritation and disbelief mixing in his tone. "This is a drill for them, not for—" She held up a hand, cutting him off. "Let them watch," she said, her voice calm but firm. "They need to see." Carter's heart raced. His palms were sweaty, his stomach knotted. He wasn't sure whether to feel relief or intimidation. Alvarez's jaw tightened, pride mingling with curiosity. Lang's frustration softened slightly into curiosity, though the fire still burned in his eyes. Every recruit felt a mixture of awe and anticipation. The veteran stopped at the center of the range, where one of the rifles had been left by a particularly frustrated recruit. She bent gracefully to adjust the scope, her movements practiced, precise, and effortless. In a single motion, she assumed a firing stance, knees slightly bent, shoulders relaxed, rifle steady. A hush fell across the range. The only sound was the whisper of wind through the nearby trees, the distant crack of other units' rifles, and the quiet hum of tension. Every recruit, every instructor, every observer held their breath. She exhaled slowly, bringing the rifle to her shoulder, aligning the sights with a black circle 30 meters away. Her hand trembled not at all. Every muscle, every nerve, every fiber of her body was perfectly coordinated. Carter couldn't help but stare, captivated. Alvarez felt a pang of both envy and hope. Lang's jaw tightened, but his eyes widened in silent recognition. This was skill beyond their imagination. Time seemed to stretch. She inhaled, held her breath, and fired. The rifle cracked, echoing sharply across the field. A single bullet struck the center of the target with perfect precision. A clean, resounding hit. The range fell silent. The black circle quivered on the wooden frame, proof of her mastery. The recruits froze, eyes wide, mouths slightly open, unable to process what they had just witnessed. One shot, one bullet, perfection. Carter's hands trembled as he lowered his rifle, disbelief flooding through him. Alvarez's chest heaved. Pride battled shame in a strange, unexpected mixture. Lang's frustration faltered, replaced by awe. Every recruit felt the weight of realization settle over them. This was what they were striving for. This discipline, control, patience was what they had been missing. The veteran lowered her rifle, calm and steady. Her eyes swept across the line of young men, reading their expressions, assessing their reactions. She did not scold. She did not boast. She only spoke with quiet authority. Accuracy is not about strength, she said. It is not about speed. It is about patience, focus, and understanding your weapon as an extension of yourself. You cannot force a bullet. You must earn it. The target listens to your mind before it obeys your hand. Carter swallowed hard, trying to absorb the weight of her words. Alvarez's shoulders relaxed slightly, the tension easing as understanding began to seep in. Lang's anger melted into curiosity, a spark of hope igniting in his eyes. The instructors watched, stunned. Sergeant Marshall's jaw tightened, torn between irritation at her intrusion and undeniable respect for her skill. He realized, slowly, that she had just delivered a lesson they could not one that the boys would never forget. The veteran continued, her voice calm but firm. You have failed repeatedly, not because you are incapable, but because you have not yet understood. Repetition alone does not create skill. Awareness, patience, and control create skill. If you can master yourselves, you will master the rifle. The recruits absorbed her words in silence. For the first time, failure did not feel like an insurmountable wall. It felt like a teacher, guiding them toward understanding, showing them what mastery could look like. Carter adjusted his rifle again, his hands less tense than before. Alvarez inhaled deeply, centering himself, ready to try again. Lang nodded subtly, as if accepting that anger could be channeled into focus. Something had shifted. Something fundamental had changed. The veteran stepped back, allowing the boys to take the rifle once more. Her presence remained, a quiet reassurance, a guiding force. They were not alone in this struggle anymore. They had a model, a mentor, someone who could show them the path they had been too blinded by frustration to see. For the first time in weeks, the firing range was filled not with the sound of failure, but with anticipation. The young recruits raised their rifles, hearts pounding, but now armed with a new understanding. They knew the weight of expectation remained, but they also knew that mastery was possible, if they approached it with patience and discipline. Carter took a deep breath, aligning his sights. Alvarez adjusted his stance, muscles taut but controlled. Lang exhaled slowly, letting frustration fall away. And then, together, they fired. The bullets did not all hit perfectly, but they struck closer than ever before. Each impact rang like a promise, a whisper of potential. And as the veteran watched, her eyes glinting with quiet satisfaction, she knew that the real lesson had only just begun. This was the turning point. This was where failure met guidance. And for the first time, the young recruits understood that they had not been powerless. They had simply not yet learned how to wield their power. The veteran lowered her rifle and stepped back fully into the shade of the trees, letting the boys take the lead. She had done what she came to do, shown them that precision was not a gift of youth, but a product of focus, discipline, and understanding. And now, the real work could begin. The afternoon sun hung low, slanting golden light across the firing range. The young recruits were tense but attentive, their rifles ready, eyes darting between the targets, and the veterans standing at the center of the field. The previous demonstration had left them stunned, breathless, and for some, inspired, but also painfully aware of the gap between their abilities and hers. One perfect shot had shattered weeks of doubt, yet it also reminded them just how far they had to go. Carter shifted his weight, feeling the stiffness in his shoulders from hours of repeated drills. His palms were clammy, but there was a spark of something new hope. For the first time, failure felt like a lesson rather than a sentence. Alvarez adjusted his stance, jaw tight, his pride now tempered with cautious humility. Lang, usually impatient and fiery, was quieter, eyes fixed intently on the veteran. Even the quietest recruits felt the change. Tension had transformed into anticipation. The veteran moved slowly, deliberately, toward the line of targets. Her presence was calm yet commanding, the kind of confidence born not of arrogance, but of experience. She picked up a rifle, one of the recruits' worn, slightly battered training models. To any casual observer, it was ordinary, perhaps even inferior. But in her hands, it became an instrument of precision, a conduit for skill honed over years of service. The recruits watched, spellbound, as she adjusted the rifle, her movements fluid and effortless. Fingers danced lightly across the trigger, scope, and stock, every adjustment meticulous. Carter held his breath, and even Alvarez, normally stoic, found himself gripping his own rifle tighter, leaning forward instinctively. Lang's lips parted slightly, his anger forgotten, replaced by silent awe. She lowered to one knee, aligning her body with the target. The world seemed to slow around her, the wind stilled, the whispers of the instructors faded, the chatter of other soldiers at nearby ranges became a distant hum. Time itself seemed to bend, compressing to the moment of her action. The recruits held their breaths, every nerve in their bodies taut. Her finger curled around the trigger, and she exhaled slowly, deliberately. The rifle cracked sharply, echoing across the range like thunder. The bullet hit its mark dead center. The target shivered under the impact, and for a brief moment, silence enveloped the field. Carter's mouth went dry. Alvarez's chest heaved. Lang's fists clenched in awe. Every recruit felt the weight of the single shot, the precision, the discipline, the mastery. One round, one perfect alignment of mind, body, and weapon. The lesson was instantaneous, visceral, unforgettable. The veteran did not celebrate. She did not even flinch. She lowered the rifle calmly, as though what she had done was mundane, almost routine. And yet, the impact of that single bullet reverberated in the minds of the recruits like a revelation. She turned to the line of young men, her gaze sweeping over each face, reading their reactions, measuring their comprehension. Her voice was calm, measured, and filled with authority, yet void of condescension. "A bullet is not a tool of force," she said. "It is a reflection of your mind, your focus, your control. Strength cannot command it. Impatience cannot guide it. Only understanding, patience, and discipline can align it with the target." Carter's hands shook slightly as he lowered his rifle. The words cut through his fog of self-doubt. He realized, suddenly, that his failures had been the result not of inability, but of misunderstanding. He had fought the rifle instead of flowing with it, forcing shots, overthinking, rushing. And now, for the first time, he saw a path forward. Alvarez's expression softened, pride mingling with humility. He had spent weeks trying to brute force precision, trying to bend the rifle to his will. But the veteran's single demonstration revealed the truth. Control was not about dominance, it was about harmony. He could feel the lesson deep in his chest, resonating in a way no lecture or scolding ever had. Lang's anger had evaporated entirely, replaced with a simmering focus. For the first time, he understood that frustration was not an enemy to be destroyed, but a signal, a guide to refined technique, patience, and understanding. His mind, previously clouded with self-doubt and irritation, now felt sharp, clear, and ready to learn. Even the quieter recruits, those who had rarely spoken or shown emotion, leaned in slightly, their attention rapt. The veteran's shot had not only demonstrated physical precision, it had shattered psychological barriers, revealing the connection between mind and body that defined mastery. She walked slowly back toward the recruits, rifle held lightly. "You have been failing because you have been fighting yourselves," she said. "You have let frustration, pride, and fear dictate your actions. That ends now. You will not merely pull a trigger. You will align your mind, your body, and your focus with the target. Only then will the shot obey you." Carter absorbed every word. He could feel tension slowly leaving his shoulders. He tried to emulate the calm, deliberate way the veteran had handled the rifle. Alvarez exhaled, feeling the tension ease in his chest. Lang's body relaxed, muscles no longer coiled with anger. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the line of young recruits began to shift from hopelessness to cautious confidence. The veteran set the rifle down gently, her hands never trembling. She did not demand perfection. She did not demand immediate success. She had shown them what was possible, and now it was up to them to begin the work of transformation. "Do you understand?" she asked, her gaze sweeping over them. "Yes," Carter whispered, though even he was surprised at how firmly the word left his lips. Alvarez nodded once, jaw tight but eyes bright. "Yes," he echoed. Lang's response was quieter, almost reverent. "Yes," he said, his voice carrying the weight of new understanding. The veteran smiled faintly, a small acknowledgement that they had grasped the lesson's essence. She did not need to celebrate, they had seen it themselves. One perfect shot had spoken louder than 100 lectures. Sergeant Marshall, standing slightly behind them, allowed himself a grudging nod of respect. The boy's eyes, once clouded with frustration and fear, now shone with comprehension. He realized that the veteran had done what he could not showed, the recruits a tangible demonstration of skill and discipline, made abstract lessons real, and inspired belief where doubt had dominated. The recruits picked up their rifles again, hesitantly at first. Their movements were tentative, careful, but not fearful. Carter aligned his sights, held his breath, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck closer to the target than ever before. Alvarez fired next, impact ringing true, closer still. Lang followed, eyes focused, muscles steady. One by one, they began to hit not perfectly, but with measurable improvement, proof that the lesson had taken root. The veteran stepped back, watching silently. She did not intervene further, for her demonstration had done its work. The rest was up to the recruits, their own patience, focus, and determination. Carter felt a surge of pride, tempered with humility. He realized the truth she had shown them. Mastery was not instantaneous, nor was it granted. It was earned through patience, understanding, and deliberate practice. Alvarez felt the same. The weight of expectation transformed from a burden into a guide. Lang's fiery energy had been channeled into focus for the first time. For the first time in weeks, the recruits understood that failure was not a dead end, but a stepping stone. One shot had revealed what countless misses had only hinted at. Success was possible, and it began with understanding themselves, not simply the rifle. As the sun dipped lower, painting the range in warm amber light, the veteran finally lowered her gaze. She had made her point, delivered her lesson, and left the rest to the boys. They would continue to struggle, certainly, but now with purpose, guidance, and the memory of one perfect shot to inspire them. That single crack of the rifle, that single bullet striking its mark, had spoken volumes, not only about precision, but about discipline, patience, and the power of mastering oneself. And in the minds of the young recruits, it would resonate far longer than any failure ever could. The sun had begun its descent behind the distant hills, painting the firing range in streaks of gold and crimson. The air still shimmered with heat from the day, but it carried a quieter energy now. The previous demonstration had shifted something fundamental in the recruits: awe, respect, and most importantly, belief. Yet the veteran knew that a single shot, however perfect, was only the beginning. True mastery required discipline, repetition, and understanding, not just of the rifle, but of the mind and body behind it. The recruits lined up again, their rifles heavier in their hands, but their movements more deliberate. Carter adjusted his stance, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. He realized he had been holding more than just a weapon in his hands. He had been holding the weight of expectation, frustration, and doubt. Alvarez exhaled slowly, centering himself. The pride that had once been a stumbling block now became a tool, grounding him as he prepared to focus properly. Lang's restless energy had been tamed into anticipation. Even the quieter recruits carried a subtle confidence, born not from mastery yet, but from the knowledge that mastery was attainable. The veteran moved among them, observing silently, yet with eyes that missed nothing. She knelt beside Carter first, her presence calm, commanding, yet nurturing. "Your grip is too tight," she said quietly. "You're trying to force control instead of finding it. Let the rifle become an extension of your arm, not a burden on your mind." Carter adjusted his fingers around the stock, loosening his grip slightly. The simple advice felt revolutionary. He had spent weeks trying to force the rifle to obey his will, pushing every round with sheer determination. Now, the idea of cooperation with the weapon, allowing it to flow naturally with his movements, offered a new approach. Alvarez was next. The veteran's gaze swept over his stance, noting the subtle shift of weight that caused his aim to falter. "You are holding tension in your shoulders and jaw," she said softly. "Every ounce of tension is transferred to the rifle. Relax, focus, breathe. Let your body guide the bullet instead of forcing it." Alvarez exhaled deeply, feeling his chest loosen. For the first time, he understood that strength was not measured in brute force, but in control, in the quiet authority of calm muscles and focused thought. He adjusted his shoulders, aligned his stance, and felt a subtle but profound difference. Lang's eyes followed the veteran closely, studying her every movement. She approached him and placed a hand lightly on his elbow, guiding him to align his body properly. "Your energy is good," she said, "but it needs direction. Anger without control is wasted force. Focus it, channel it, and the rifle will follow your intent." Lang's jaw tightened, but this time with determination rather than frustration. He adjusted his stance, feeling the coiled tension in his body shift into controlled energy. The veteran's guidance transformed his impulsive movements into measured precision. Once all the recruits had received individual attention, she gathered them in a small semicircle, rifles lowered but ready. Her tone became slightly more didactic, but still calm. "Marksmanship is more than pulling a trigger. It is about control of the mind. You must synchronize your breath, your heartbeat, your focus, and your intent. A shot is the sum of countless small decisions made in harmony, not a single action done in isolation." Carter listened intently, internalizing every word. He realized that all of his failures had come from disjointed actions. Breath misaligned with trigger squeeze, mind racing faster than muscles, impatience dictating decisions. The lesson now was clear. Mastery required patience, deliberate alignment, and mindfulness. The veteran instructed them in a series of practical exercises to internalize this principle. First, she guided them through breathing techniques. Slow, deliberate inhales, holding briefly, controlled exhales timed with the rifle's trigger pull. Each recruit practiced, first slowly, then in rhythm, until breath and movement began to feel natural. Next, she introduced posture drills. She had them practice adjusting their shoulders, feet, and grip repeatedly, emphasizing comfort and stability over rigid form. "Your body must be steady, but not locked," she explained. "A rigid body fights the rifle. A relaxed body becomes one with it." Carter was surprised at how subtle the changes were, but also how dramatically they affected his aim. Each small adjustment brought him closer to precision, not by force, but by harmony with the weapon. Alvarez, normally tense and proud, found that his rifle no longer felt like an enemy to overcome. It felt like an extension of his intention. Lang's fiery energy now flowed through his body rather than against it, each movement purposeful and deliberate. Then came focus exercises, mental drills designed to strengthen concentration under pressure. The veteran had them visualize the bullet's path, not merely the target. They imagined each step, the inhale, the steadiness of the hand, the release of the trigger, the trajectory of the bullet, and its connection to the rifle and their own body. By training the mind, she explained, the body would follow naturally. The recruits practiced for hours, each round fired with more intention than the last. Some still missed the target, but each miss carried lessons embedded with the veteran's guidance. They began to feel control rather than panic, patience rather than desperation. Every round became a data point, every miss a teacher rather than a punishment. A veteran moved quietly among them, offering correction and encouragement where needed. She did not scold. She did not belittle. She allowed failure to guide, teaching through observation, demonstration, and subtle adjustment. Slowly, the recruits began to internalize the lessons, and their confidence grew. By late afternoon, the atmosphere on the range had transformed. Where frustration and despair had once ruled, there was now focus, determination, and quiet excitement. The boys were no longer firing blindly. They were firing with intent, their movements synchronized with the lessons they had learned. Carter aligned his sights carefully, exhaled, and fired. The bullet struck the black circle dead center. His chest swelled with a mix of pride and disbelief. Alvarez followed, hitting nearly the center with perfect alignment. Lang's bullet struck slightly off-center, but far closer than anything he had achieved before. The quieter recruits also showed improvement, their shots inching closer to precision with every attempt. The veteran observed silently, a faint smile on her lips. This was her true lesson, that mastery was a combination of mental discipline, controlled energy, and repetition guided by understanding. The recruits had begun to grasp it. The single perfect shot of yesterday had inspired them, but the sustained, deliberate instruction of today was teaching them how to replicate it, how to internalize the principles behind it, and most importantly, how to believe in their own potential. She called them together one last time as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the range in golden orange light. "Remember this," she said softly, yet with authority. "A shot is never just a shot. It is a reflection of your mind, your focus, and your discipline. If you control yourself, the rifle will obey. If you fail to control yourself, it will not matter how strong or fast you are, you will always miss." Carter, Alvarez, and Lang exchanged glances, a newfound understanding in their eyes. For the first time, failure no longer felt like a condemnation, but like a guidepost. They realized that mastery would not come instantly. It would come through patience, discipline, and continuous learning. As the recruits cleaned their rifles and packed up for the day, the veteran watched them silently. She had given them the tools, demonstrated the principle, and corrected their technique. Now, it was up to them to continue the work themselves. Each step forward would be hard-won, but they had begun to see the path clearly for the first time. The sun set, and with it, the day's lessons settled into their minds like seeds planted in fertile soil. Tomorrow, they would return to the range stronger, more focused, and better prepared. They had learned that the rifle was more than a weapon. It was a mirror, reflecting their own patience, focus, and understanding. And that, the veteran knew, was the most important lesson of all. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of dust, pine, and anticipation. The recruits lined up once more on the firing range, but today was different. Gone were the slumped shoulders, the shaking hands, and the hollow frustration of repeated failure. Today, there was focus, discipline, and quiet determination, a transformation forged over weeks of struggle and guided by the veteran who had shown them the path. Carter adjusted his stance, feeling the difference in his muscles, his grip, and his breath. Each movement was deliberate, controlled, and in harmony with the rifle in his hands. He was no longer fighting the weapon. He and the rifle were extensions of each other, aligned in purpose and action. His mind was clear, focused, every heartbeat and breath synchronized with intent. Alvarez, standing beside him, radiated quiet confidence. Pride was no longer a stumbling block, but a foundation. His body was steady, his grip firm yet relaxed. Every adjustment he made was measured, deliberate, and precise. He had learned the subtle art of patience, how to let the rifle guide his hands, how to align his mind with the target, and how to channel his energy into controlled precision. Lang, usually impulsive and fiery, was calm, his coiled energy now directed with focus and purpose. His movements were fluid, each adjustment precise, his mind centered. For the first time, he understood that success came not from brute force or frustration, but from discipline, repetition, and awareness. The veteran stood at the edge of the range, watching silently. Her presence was calm but commanding, a beacon of experience and authority. She had guided them, corrected them, and taught them the lessons that no lecture or manual could convey. Now, it was their moment to demonstrate the culmination of their training. "Line up," she said, her voice calm yet resonant. "Today, you will fire not as novices, but as marksmen. Every shot must reflect control, focus, and understanding. Remember, the rifle is an extension of your mind. If you master yourself, it will obey. If not, it will betray you." Carter raised his rifle, aligning the sights with the target. His breathing was steady, controlled, deliberate. He exhaled slowly, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat sync with the rifle. Then, with a calm squeeze of the trigger, he fired. The bullet struck the center of the target with unerring precision. The black circle shivered under the impact, a perfect demonstration of control, patience, and focus. Alvarez followed immediately, inhaling deeply, adjusting his stance, and firing with measured intent. His bullet struck almost perfectly, just slightly off-center, but clearly the result of skill rather than luck. A small smile tugged at his lips, not from pride alone, but from the quiet satisfaction of mastery achieved through discipline. Lang stepped forward, coiling his energy into deliberate action. He exhaled slowly, allowed the rifle to become part of him, and fired. The bullet struck closer than ever before, a testament to the transformation that had occurred within him. Where frustration had once dictated movement, control now guided it. The quieter recruits followed, their shots hitting with increasing accuracy, each impact a silent declaration of growth. They had internalized the lessons: patience, control, focus, and harmony with the rifle. Every miss was smaller, every hit closer, until the line of young marksmen fired with confidence and skill. The veteran watched, her eyes scanning each shot, observing each adjustment. She nodded slightly, satisfied. This was the culmination of weeks of struggle, failure, guidance, and learning. The transformation was clear. The recruits were no longer novices. They were marksmen in their own right, capable of precision under pressure. Sergeant Marshall, standing slightly behind them, allowed himself a rare smile. He had witnessed the impossible transformation from trembling, frustrated boys to confident, disciplined marksmen. The veteran's intervention had bridged the gap that months of traditional training could not. He felt a deep respect, tinged with humility, for the woman who had taught what others could not. The veteran stepped forward, her voice carrying across the range. Remember this day. Remember what it feels like to hit the target with focus, patience, and understanding. Every shot is not just a test of skill, but a reflection of your mind. Continue to train, continue to grow, and never forget the lessons learned through failure. Carter lowered his rifle, chest rising and falling in steady breaths. He felt a surge of pride, tempered with humility. Weeks of repeated failure, frustration, and self-doubt had culminated in this moment of mastery. For the first time, he truly understood what it meant to control himself and the rifle in harmony. Alvarez exhaled slowly, feeling the tension drain from his shoulders. He had learned that strength alone could not guarantee success, that patience, discipline, and awareness were equally, if not more, important. Pride was no longer a stumbling block, but a guiding force, shaping his actions rather than controlling them. Lang's eyes shone with newfound understanding. He realized that impulsive energy, when channeled correctly, could become a tool of precision rather than frustration. Every shot he had fired today was proof that he had internalized the lessons, transforming raw talent into controlled skill. The veteran addressed the group one final time. Precision is not a single achievement. It is a continuous journey. Today, you have succeeded not because of luck, but because you have learned to control yourselves, to understand the rifle, and to focus with purpose. Carry this lesson forward, and you will achieve far more than a single perfect shot. Mastery is a habit, not an event. The recruits stood quietly, absorbing her words. They understood that this day was not the end, but a beginning. Their journey as marksmen had truly started, founded on discipline, understanding, and the knowledge that failure was a teacher rather than a punishment. Carter looked at the target one last time, feeling a deep connection between his mind, body, and rifle. He realized that every failure, every frustration, every miss had been necessary. They had all led to this moment of clarity, skill, and confidence. Alvarez nodded to himself, silently acknowledging the journey he had undertaken. Strength and pride had guided him only so far, but discipline and understanding had brought him to precision. Lang exhaled, feeling the culmination of frustration transformed into mastery. The veteran stepped back, letting the recruits gather their rifles. She had taught them the lessons they needed to learn: patience, focus, harmony with the weapon, and the psychological discipline required for mastery. But more importantly, she had shown them the power of guidance, persistence, and belief. One perfect shot could inspire, but sustained learning and discipline transformed potential into skill. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the range, the recruits cleaned their rifles and prepared to leave. They carried more than equipment. They carried lessons, understanding, and the confidence that precision was attainable with patience, discipline, and focus. Carter, Alvarez, and Lang exchanged smiles, a quiet camaraderie forged through shared struggle and growth. The veteran watched them go, satisfied that she had not only taught them to aim, but to think, to focus, and to master themselves. For the young recruits, the journey of repeated failure, guidance, and eventual mastery had left an indelible mark. They had learned that precision was born from discipline, patience, and understanding, not luck or brute strength. They had discovered the power of a single perfect shot, and more importantly, the path to create many more. And as they walked away from the firing range, rifles slung over their shoulders, the lessons of the female veteran lingered in their minds like a quiet echo, Mastery was not an event. It was a journey. Each step forward, each deliberate action, each disciplined breath brought them closer to the precision they had once only dreamed of. The firing range grew silent, empty except for the echoes of the day, the footprints of progress, and the knowledge that the next generation of marksmen had been forever transformed.